please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
India has evened the score. It has finally hiked import duties on goods imported from the United States. This move comes after US President Donald Trump increased tariffs on Indian steel and aluminum. With this decision, India has joined China, the European Union and other nations in imposing retaliatory tariffs against the US. From almonds to chickpeas to apples, India has targeted 29 goods, but here's the interesting fact. Motorcycles over 800cc like the ones manufactured by Harley-Davidson have been spared from this round of additional tariffs. President Trump has been vocal in the past about the high tariffs on the Harley-Davidson, even taunting India just a few months ago. First up, Ritu Parnabhuyan is standing by with the latest. Ritu, the government had estimated about a $240 million hit on account of the steel and aluminum tariffs imposed by the US. Will this retaliation be enough?
Well, as last night CBIC notified the notification regarding the duties, and there is a twist to this notification. The twist is that the notification will come into effect only from August 4th. But as you said, the trigger was the aluminium and steel duties, but these duties will come to effect only from August 4th, and this gap has been given because India and US will be negotiating on several trade-related issues. In fact, on 25th, a delegation will be coming down from United States, and India wants to keep this notification in the background while negotiating many of the trade-related demands. Then again, the second twist is the motorcycles, and that has been kept out of this list. You'll see that there are 29 products at the moment. The broad categories on which the duty has been imposed includes farm products as well as products from the chemical sector and metal sector as well. You have flat rolled steel. Many of these products are actually manufactured in what is known as the Rust Belt states, which are in between East and the West Coast. Net, we can say that this notification lacks teeth because it is not immediately, the government has decided not to basically implement it immediately. There is a gap of around 45 days, and we'll have to wait and see what is the outcome of the negotiations between Indian and US trade diplomats, which will start from next week. With that, it's back to you.
Ritu, appreciate you joining us. And speaking of what those negotiations may in fact hold, we're now joined by Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the United States. Ms. Shankar, appreciate you joining us here. So there is still about a month and a half. There will be discussion between India and the US starting the 25th of this month. So far, 29 products where India has said that they will retaliate with higher tariffs. Do you expect that this gives us more leverage as we get into those discussions?
In a sense, it does. But it's a long period, and the EU, China, Canada are all likely to have their retaliatory tariffs come into effect sooner. Of course, Japan has been holding out because of negotiations. So I think we will wait and see how the negotiations go and then put these into effect. But they are proportionate in the sense that the tariffs really amount to the same as the loss of trade for India on account of the steel and aluminum tariffs that the US has imposed, and which it really did not exempt us from. It initially exempted some countries, including the EU and Canada, but those exemptions expired and were not renewed by the US in June. And that's how the US tariffs are going to come into effect. And EU, Canada, all the allies of the US, and China, of course, have announced that they will have tariffs in place.
Smart move on India's part to leave motorcycles out of this list. I mean, this has been a controversy that President Trump has made an issue when it comes to trade with India.
Well, there are not so many motorcycles exported into India. And again, it's up to us to see how the talks go and then see if there's need for expansion of the list.
Okay. What would you expect the discussions will now focus on? I mean, you know, it's a different story when it comes to the US and China. The trade deficit that India has with the US, you know, pales in comparison to what the US has with China. What do you believe will be the key points of negotiation? One, of course, is this entire issue of localization of data, and that has become a bit of a sticky point with the US, with the Software Alliance saying that that will have severe economic consequences if they are forced to set up servers here in India. What do you believe will be the sticky points as we get into this new round of negotiation?
I think that, you know, for India, it's the issue of visas and, yes, localization of servers because of security grounds. There are other countries which have also imposed these requirements and to which the U.S. countries have actually adhered. So, in some sense, you know, it's on national security grounds. When these issues had come up in the past, we found ways of dealing with them in mutual consultation. So, from India's point of view, it's the tariffs on steel and aluminium, it's the visa issue, it's the you know, whole issue of pushing for WTO plus IPR. And for the U.S., I think it's a market access issue. They want more opening of markets. And somewhere between these two, if trade-offs are possible, then you could see some kind of broad agreement. The U.S. has also gone to the WTO for consultation on all the what they call export subsidies, which India provides for exports, and which, according to the U.S., encompasses a range of areas, including, you know, software parks and so on. So they say that India has now graduated because your per capita income is higher than the threshold income. It used to be lower. And India, of course, would like to see a transition period, not some kind of a cliff effect where we are asked to immediately kind of, you know, stop these, but hopefully that we can taper them off, because we do understand that we will, and we would also like to see which of these would be found not to be in compliance of the WTO and which are the ones that could be retained. So there's a pretty broad agenda encompassing IPR, intellectual property rights, movement of people, national security data requirements, tariffs and retaliatory tariffs, market access and movement of people.
My final question to you, you know, you were speaking of trade-offs as we get into this round of negotiations. What would be the absolute non-negotiables, and where do you believe India should bring in a certain amount of flexibility? I mean, on the controversial issue of price caps on medical devices, for instance, which has become a sore topic with the US, is that an area where India should show some flexibility?
Well, you know, I think they've been imposed on, you know, health grounds, because some of those prices were so high that people could not afford them. Yes, these are areas where you can work out compromises. For instance, you know, U.S. companies could easily manufacture in India because it's a large market, and the prices of their devices would come down and the profits they would make would be enormous. So there are practical ways to get around these problems if we don't get into ideological arguments. Now, for instance, on copyright, you know, a lot of the book companies, they began publishing books in India meant explicitly for the Indian market, published in India, and they release them at a much lower price than books which may be published elsewhere, because it's profitable to do so. So this helps them beat the, you know, copyright theft on their books, which used to be very rampant and has come down. And you see the same with movies, where the movie industry now releases the films probably in India, probably at the same time that it releases overseas, to prevent copyright theft. So there are practical policies which could be adopted by U.S. companies to get around some of the issues. For instance, the price cap on medical devices could be something which the price cap on medical devices is something the companies could work their way around by actually producing in India. It would be far cheaper to do so.
Okay.
Or working out joint ventures in India,
Sure.
in which case the price caps may not even be necessary.
All right.
So there are practical ways around these issues, but I don't want to, kind of say what is non-negotiable,
Fair
where we
enough.
have flexibility, because I think leave that space for the government.
Absolutely, and those negotiations start on the 25th. Meera Shankar, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18 to talk about the latest move that's coming from India in the tariff war between India and the US. We are going to take a break, but there's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere.